Hello, everyone. Welcome to Watertown Ford's Charter Chat. My name is Emily Damon, and I'm the chair of the steering committee for Watertown Ford. Watertown Ford is a community initiative that seeks to expand the number of voices in the charter review process through a series of events designed to educate, empower, and engage residents. Our Sunday afternoon charter chats are an opportunity to share your views and ideas about the charter review process and hopefully learn some new things about Watertown's government and the charter review. We hope that through events like this, community members can get connected with others interested in town government and become more informed in the charter review process. Additionally, we want to see empowered community members asking questions, raising concerns, and offering comments about the charter review. As a quick reminder, today's meeting is being recorded, so for those who cannot attend today, they can listen in at a later time. I want to start with one quick announcement. If you were at our last charter chat, Tony provided us a great look into Watertown's government. And those slides, if you're interested, are available on the website under the first look slide deck. And those have also been translated into Spanish. So I want to quickly go over today's agenda. First, we'll begin with a meeting process and meeting guidelines, then have a quick charter review update with question and answers. And then we'll be spending time with our expert panel to discuss the manager and mayor conversation. So we'll be joined by John Hecht and Roberta Miller as they discuss these considerations within our government. And then finally, we'll wrap up with ideas about future charter chats. So I'll be passing it off to Tia and Larry, who will review the meeting guidelines and agenda. And Tia and Larry will be facilitating today with Janice and Tiffany helping run the chat.
Great. Thank you, Emily. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this gorgeous day. It's sunny, chilly. Great day to spend it inside, I suppose. So anyway, good to see you all. You've got the agenda. So what we're going to do is, there's going to be, our expert panel will present. We're going to get an update. Our expert panel will present. There will be time for questions, answers, and comments. We encourage everybody to come with kind of curiosity as their mindset. We'll be muted at the start, then open for questions and discussions. And if folks could, we're all Zoom experts at this point, if we could just mute ourselves while other people are, make sure we mute ourselves. And then if you're not speaking, and then if you'd like to speak, there's that reactions button on the bottom, which allows you to raise a hand. And, I'll just give you a little example of it. You give reactions, you raise a hand, it looks like that. The moderator will call on you. And then when you've been called on, if you could remember to lower your hand, that'd be great, because it will help us kind of keep track of who we've called on. And, along with curiosity, just, we're all, it's managing the technology. So a little room for forgiveness as we kind of sort out the order of operations, and, certainly let us know if we've missed up on somebody. What we'll do then in between the chat and the comments, be monitoring for common themes. And so we may not actually bring up your specific question, but we will absolutely reference it in terms of the theme. Participants, I think everybody, one of the beautiful things about Zoom is that we can see everybody. Down at the bottom, in that bottom bar, you'll see a button that says participants. You can see the list of participants that are there. And it's great because all of our names are labeled with our photographs as well. So as we speak, we're able to know who's talking. If you're on the phone, when you ask a question or make a comment, if you could just please state your name, because we're not going to necessarily know who that is. So I think I've gotten through all of the facilitation notes. I asked my co-facilitators to pipe up if I've missed something. Larry?
Nope.
Okay, great.
We're good.
Awesome. Okay, and I think I'm even a little ahead of schedule. That's fabulous. I want to turn this over to, I believe we decided Tony, is that correct? Tony and Lisa, and I think we discussed, Tony was going to give us an update on the last CRC meeting and process.
I thought Lisa was taking the lead, but I'd be happy to. It's up to her.
Okay. So do you guys want to thumb wrestle? Lisa, where are you on this?
I think we could share, and Tony expressed that he had prepared some notes. So Tony, I'll hand it to you to start off.
Okay, great. And I'll just give you a 10-minute warning. 3:25 is where we're looking to wrap this up. No, yeah.
No,
3:35, sorry.
I don't have that. Yes, let me say the last meeting, last Tuesday was a very interesting meeting. We had as our guests, the Collins Center put together 4 counselors from 3 who have mayors and 1 who has a manager. The reason to put so many from mayors was because we're so used to having counselors, town managers, so the emphasis was on the mayor. We heard from Melissa Cox, who's the city councilor in Gloucester that has a mayor, Jennifer Gorotiatis, and I will just say Jennifer from now on, who is the ward councilor from Melrose, that also a ward councilor from Melrose, Paul Gianti, who is the city council president from Beverly, and Mandy Jo Hanecki, who is a town councilor from Amherst. So what I did was to try to think about, there was a lot to cover in this. So I thought I tried to do was just pick out some of the things that were unusual that don't fit naturally into what we do here in Watertown, some of the differences they have. Just a sort of quick, before I begin in that, just really we're looking at Melrose, which, as I say, has a council mayor form of government. The mayor's power is real, but there is power also derived from both the residents and the councilors in that city. They believe that that the idea of election brings transparency because both the residents have the ability to elect the mayor and also elect the councilors. They look to the mayor for a vision of what Melrose might look like, given the fact that it is hard to find a vision amongst the 11 councilors. Beverly has gone through 2 charter changes, one in 2000, one in 2010, and right now is in a 2022, just 2020, just like we are. There is at one point they had a weak mayor and a strong board of aldermen. They presently have a strong mayor and a town council. Amherst is new to they just finished, with the help of the Collins Center also, their charter review. So they have made this, excuse me, to a councilor manager system just recently. And they have 13 members of their council and, as I say, a manager. And then the other one I didn't mention, excuse me, was Melissa Cox, who is with the city of Gloucester. She's been a long-term councilor there. They have a strong mayor and they have experienced a sort of cooperative working relationship between the mayor and the town council. I'm going to pick out some things that I thought were particularly interesting in the discussion about some of the issues that they've been trying, that both this group and the group 2 weeks ago, the mayors and managers were trying to address. That has to do with vision, with legislative capacity, with transparency, communication, responsiveness, and accountability. Now, they didn't cover each one of those specifically, but there's some interesting little notes about how each of them do things just a little bit different. For example, in Gloucester, they have a city analyst who works with the town council. That is, they have a position in the charter that there's someone who's a city analyst who happens to be a budget for working with the council on the budget. It's a part-time position, but I'm sorry, it's in Beverly. I apologize. It's in Beverly. So that the town council, the councilors in that city have an opportunity to have a direct resource and a part-time budget analyst. Another interesting thing would be in the both in Amherst and in Gloucester. There seems to be a working arrangement between the powers to be when it comes to organizing the budget. There's a give and take between the two bodies. Though again, it's the mayor who creates the budget, but there's a give and take between the two around the final version of the budget. One interesting thing in Amherst, the budget process isn't done by committees, it's done by the committee of the whole, so that all the members participate, all the council members participate in the budget discussion. An interesting aspect that we don't have here is in Amherst, they have a resident advisory committee. This resident advisory committee, its responsibility is to work with the manager for all appointments. So there's a 3-person board that works with the manager on appointments. They sit in on the interviews with the manager. There is some interesting pieces about communication. There is only one of the 3 cities that actually has someone who is in charge of communication and in citizen engagement, and that is in Amherst. They actually have 3 individuals who are called community engagement staff, who spend their time engaging the community into the workings of the town. Most other cities that we were looking at do not have specific people assigned to that responsibility. Another interesting piece was what kind of help does the councilors get? Do the city councilors get? Most councilors don't get a lot of support specifically. However, in Gloucester, let's get these cities mixed up. In Melrose, there's a full-time city clerk advocate who works also with the town council. But in Amherst, there's a city clerk, and I say clerk of the council, I'm sorry, a clerk of the council who devotes 80% of their time to working with the council. So that is a much greater opportunity to have assistance. In our town, we have a part-time 20-hour-a-week person. Another interesting piece about this was the public forum. All the cities had some type of situation where residents can come to a meeting and discuss or present issues. Many of them don't have a discussion, just a presentation of the issues. However, in Amherst, it's different. They have both the public forum and public comment period. A public comment period is where you can make comments, but a public forum period is actually where a significant amount of time is devoted to a interaction between both the residents and the councilors. And there's actually a back and forth discussion about what the issue is they bring. I did mention the 3 community relationship officers. Some of the towns rely on the mayor to be the communication person directly. One particular person has coffees with then one mayor has a series of coffee chats with the residents. But there's the only one that has a particular approach to having someone engage the community would be Amherst. In terms of the issue of equity, or equity around, not sorry, I should say equity, so around human rights, there are 3 of the committees have, 3 of the cities have human rights commissions. Have human rights commissions. One of those, Amherst not only has a Human Rights Commission, but also has a community safety working group, which came out of some of the incidents around the George Floyd murder. So they created a community safety working group with involving both the police and residents. But the other two communities have a Human Rights Commission, that is Melrose and Gloucester. I'm sorry, Melrose and Gloucester, right? So those are just some of the things that jumped out at me when I heard the presentation. There's a lot more in there, but I was trying to point to things that we are different than what we have in our community right now, so that you would get a little feel for what other communities are doing around issues around the budget, transparency, equity or human rights, communication, and particularly the interaction between the counselors and the residents. So I'll turn that over to Lisa if she wants to expand on any of that.
Thanks, Tony. That was very thorough. You brought up many aspects that I took note of as well. I'll just make a couple more because it was very thorough. And there were kind of themes. One is that generally between this and I felt like our last CRC meeting with mayors and town managers, in particular Salem, since her experience of being an executive admin as well as now mayor of Salem, that the accountability piece, which we hear a lot about in Watertown, there tends to be a recognition that there's a more equal leverage or pressure or more frequent review of how accountability is going when you have elected officials, because it's generally a 2-year term and you have the public that actively weigh on that through voting. And then as Tony pointed out, other cities and towns have public forums, or the way they've structured their boards and commissions seem a little more fully invested with the public. So as Tony mentioned, one of the things that jumped out with me was having a resident advisory committee on boards and appointments, which I thought was interesting, and not just from accountability or transparency point of view, but it can be hard to get volunteers, as many of you know who still serve this. You're sometimes in the hot seat, public position, it's volunteer, it's service. But what I liked is not just that there was a resident advisory committee, but you automatically, because of the process of how that committee also helped improve the process of appointments, that you automatically kind of created this mini network of getting the word out and more residents understanding how to apply and what the roles would be for each of the board and commissions and the responsibility. I'd say the other thing is that Amherst is, I find interesting, as familiar with somewhat what they were going through, because when I was on the town council technology committee and we were working on the town website, Amherst was also going through a redesign of their website. And we felt like a lot of the changes that they made to their website and questions that they were asking were also relevant in Watertown. And so I appreciated, again, some of the things that they ended up writing into their charter to be sure that things would happen and not just kind of be left as what I call institutional knowledge, or we have some great people in Watertown that have served for a very long time, but some of our practices aren't written down or specified. And so we kind of rely on them to happen based on who sits in that seat. And the last thing I'd say is on Beverly, as Tony again mentioned, of having that professional view, that they also talked about the budget process and helping. It sounded like there was an active collaboration. They kept saying collaboration, ongoing conversation through the year with council and the executive office, whether it was a mayor or town manager. So things seemed a little, perhaps less boxed in at certain times of year with council maybe than what we have in Watertown. I will say the last thing I felt after going through these two CRC meetings from executive and then council point of view, legislative side, is that we have an awful lot of things going on in Watertown, and regardless of our size or our budget, we are rebuilding our city, our town, literally, and I think we have a lot on our plates, and I don't really see us slowing down, as we're shifting now to biotech and outside of Kendall or Boston, however you want to define it. So it's an exciting time, but we're going to continue to have changes and I think positive growth, which is a good thing for us. So I'm hoping that we can reach more residents in town, and the CRC, as a member of CRC, that I can keep that in mind so we don't just think about where we are now and where we've been, but where we're going. So with that, I'm hoping
Could
that
I make
we could.
2 more quick comments, please?
Sure.
Just one quick comment, because we focused on the presentations. There was a little bit more to the meeting too. I had asked at that meeting, and I don't know if this is the process that's going to be used, but 2 things. One, we are, in addition to the subcommittee on outreach, the town council president, Mark Sideris, asked for the creation of a preamble subcommittee. There were 2 people, he didn't say who applied to that. He's looking for a 3rd person before he will announce a preamble subcommittee. The other issue was I had asked him regarding once the very important issue of mayor versus manager comes to its end, how do we then bring other issues to the council, to the committee, to the CRC, whether they come directly from us or and he actually said they hadn't talked about that yet. But one of the possibility ways, because one of the members of the CRC said she's making a list of things that she would like to see changed in the charter. So one of the possible, and I'm only saying this, possible avenues that might be chosen by the town manager working with the Collins Center would be the creation of lists that each each committee member submits to the chair. He then puts them together, sees where the duplication is, and then presents them to the committee. I don't know how that will be, and I don't know what level of public input there will be, but that may be the way that we proceed post mayor/manager.
Thanks. And before I turn it over, I know we're only leaving a few minutes here for public questions, which is the point that we've heard over and over again, that we have a very large CRC committee. I think we're the only one in the state. The Collins Center confirmed that has all the full council on the committee. That was confirmed again at our CRC meeting. So that's something to think about, I think, in our charter. And to that point, as much as Mark tried to say, keep one question per member, it still didn't leave much time at all for the public to kind of weigh in and get their questions to be heard. So I was glad that Tony asked the question, okay, how can people submit their ideas or question even outside of this? Because it's very busy trying to manage the chat and, a Q&A, and depending on how the Zoom is set up. So before I turn over, I guess I'll just say as well that to keep in mind that it's important for the public to weigh in, because the CRC will make recommendations for any changes that they should think could be considered by the town council. And the town council is the final say on that. So we have all councilors and 6 members of the committee, but the council is the majority of the committee. So depending on the changes, it gets kind of complicated, but basically the CRC will make their recommendations. I'm hoping that we continue to get public input into the spring, instead of cutting that off in early summer as a time frame. Right now is spring, summer. And I think it's a good question that Tony asked, how Mark might get that feedback, because with the ongoing pandemic and the importance of the charter review, it'd be great to, I think, not have all members in the public on board of what we're considering or not for our changes. So Tia, I think I'm turning back over to you, and thanks for everybody's time on a beautiful Sunday.
Yeah, you guys were fast. So we do have a few minutes. I had put one question in the chat, and it's you guys are getting there, which is, could you, we've got a few minutes, like 3. Could you please review the process by which changes to the charter are approved? And you're both kind of alluding to it, but I went to the meeting. I was a little unclear on how it works.
Well, I think Lisa was mentioning changes to the charter. And actually, it's on our website too. We put 3 different ways you can change the charter. We're looking at 2 of the ways because we don't have a commission. We have a committee. The simplest, well, the one that doesn't in the state legislature, are any changes that don't have to do with the change of terms or how people are elected, and so that is one avenue, and that's simply going from the committee to the council. The council votes yes or no on the changes get submitted to the voters, and then the change either gets accepted or not accepted. The other time, if we do decide to change the mayor to manager, or we do decide that there's a term, we want to change the terms of a counselor, or the how the election is run, that usually goes from the committee to the town council, but also then to the state legislature, and then back to the voters. So that's how it's done. And many of the changes in the last 30 years, some of them went to the legislators, some of them didn't, but that's how it's done. I should just mention, I want to quickly give a shout out to Marcy. The minutes, one of the missing pieces of this, which I think is very important, that we do not have minutes of our meetings yet. We have one set of minutes. And this is really, I think, a problem. But Mark is addressing it by hiring our town council clerk to work overtime to help catch up on the minutes. We've had 5 meetings now, and we have one set of minutes. But Marcy does a wonderful job taking minutes from the meeting, and that's what Lisa and I use each time we present. And so a shout out to her for taking the minutes.
Here. They are some of the best minutes I've ever read. So thank you, Marcy. And thank you, Tony and Lisa, for the summary and for answering the question on the way changes are submitted. We have put a link in the chat to where you can find that information on the Watertown Forward website. There's one other question that's come in. Is there a way for the public to see what town councilors are proposing for charter changes so we can weigh in supporting or not? In 3 minutes.
There should be a way. There will be a way. Whatever we propose will be public record. The question really is how the proposals will be handled, in sense of, will they be collated into, well, this is overlaps with this a little bit, so maybe we'll discuss both of them together. But I'm assuming it'll be something like the minute of X meeting will include the discussion of the following changes, and so that the public will know what those changes are ahead of time.
Okay, and they'll have an opportunity to offer up feedback or input or.
Well, this is what Mark hadn't established yet. So to Tony's point, we asked, do we get more specifics about that? And it hasn't been developed.
Okay, all right. One question is, was an organizational chart ever put forth?
Yeah, there's a very nice organizational chart. that I think Marcia had a lot to do with a little help from Alodia. I'm not sure. I think it's on our website too.
Yes,
but
a link has been posted in the chat. So we've got about a minute more. Are there any other questions? Okay, I'm not seeing hands, physical, cartoonish or otherwise. Any other comments, final comments, Tony or Lisa?
No, thank you for coming. Those people who come, thank you for continuing to come. And please, if you can get other people to come on our Tuesdays, it's nice to have people in the audience. Come participate in the meeting. Unfortunately, we still haven't figured out the technology so you can see who they are. We can see them, but you can't. But that's going to be worked on.
Great, thank you. I'm going to turn this over to Larry.
Thank you, Tia. Thanks, Tony and Lisa. Hi, everybody. We're going to transition now to and do a deeper dive on one of these topics. I think, as many of you know, several governance models are being considered by the Charter Review Committee. People have been talking about an appointed town manager with an elected town council, similar to current situation, and an elected mayor and an elected town council. There are other changes to the charter, as we know, that are being considered. And to explore these different forms of government and what some of the implications are, and then engage in a conversation with us, we are very happy to have two longtime Watertown residents with lots of experience in local and state government, including some other parts of the country. And that's John Hecht and Roberta Miller. So thank you to the two of you. Just very briefly, by way of bios, you probably know John's recently retired from serving as state rep in the Mass Legislature. He was there for 6 terms. So I got to vote for John 6 times, which was very nice. He also served 2 terms on Watertown's Town Council, and he is a Charter Review Committee member. So it brings a lot to our time here today. And Roberta, you may know from all of her work in Watertown over the years, she's currently the Special Projects Advisor at the Mosesian Center. And prior to that, she was Executive Director there. And thank you for all of the great work you've done to get that established for about 5 years. And I learned that Roberta also was a counselor at large when Watertown made its transition to the current form of government. And prior to that, she had a 21-year professional consulting career where she was working with cities and towns and city councils in Massachusetts and around the country. She very often got involved in projects that had something to do with racial or political or social issues that those communities were struggling with, and inclusion and participation. So kind of a perfect panel for us to hear from today and to talk with. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to John, who is going to share some perspectives on forms of government. And then Roberta is going to speak for a few minutes as well. Then we'll open it up for your questions and your comments. John?
Okay, thank you, Larry. And thank you everybody for joining in. It's great we're having these conversations, so thank you to Watertown Forward. And it's great that so many people want to be part of thinking about how we can improve our charter, our local constitution here in Watertown. That's the basis of our democracy here. And I think we're all feeling very keenly these days that we need to be doing our part everywhere we can to tend and protect and improve our democracy. So thank you for being part of that. I'm going to kick this off, as Larry said, by giving an overview of municipal government in Massachusetts, and especially the structure and the process of government in cities in Massachusetts. We have 351 municipalities in Massachusetts altogether. About 60 of them are cities, including, of course, Watertown. And the rest, so the other close to 300 are towns. we have a couple of charts. Can we share those now? Tia and Emily, are those ready to share? Let me see now, I'm losing my notes. How do I get back to my notes? Well, you can see these two charts. These are also available on the town website, on the Charter Review Committee website. And they're two different ones. One is of municipalities, both cities and towns, that are close to Watertown in terms of population. And then there are ones, there's a second chart of all of the Massachusetts cities. So that roughly 60 communities that I referred to that have a city form of government. And the interesting thing, if you look at these charts, you'll see that no real definitive pattern really jumps out from them. Generally, cities are larger than towns. Under state law, you can only become a city in Massachusetts if you have a population of over 12,000. But there are large towns. For example, on the first chart, if you look, the very first community is Arlington. And it has about 10,000 more people than Watertown, and it is a town. And then there are also many small cities. Winthrop has a population that's less than half of Watertown's. It's around 16,000 people, and Winthrop is a city. So if we focus just on the cities now, the city form of government, there are the two main forms of city government in Massachusetts that Larry and others have referred to, the council mayor form of government and the council manager form of government. About 3/4 of the cities in Massachusetts, the ones on this this chart that's being shown now, are in the council mayor form, about 3/4 of them. And only about a quarter, or the remaining quarter, are the council manager form of government like we have in Watertown. And again, there's no really strict correlation between the size of the city and which of these forms is used. Boston, which is the largest city by far in Massachusetts, has a mayor, but there are other large cities in the state, Lowell, Worcester, Cambridge, that have managers. And as I said before, there are also some small cities like Winthrop, but also Newburyport, North Adams is another one with a very small population that have mayors. So I guess, the conclusion that you can sort of take away from that is that, we have these two forms of city government in Massachusetts, but it's not it's not an easy sort of fit. There's no sort of one size fits any particular type of city. We have a variety of different sizes and types of cities using these two different forms of city government. Now, both of these forms of city government have two main parts. They have an executive branch and they have a legislative branch. And the main distinction between the council mayor and the council manager cities is how they choose the head of that first branch, that executive branch. Mayors, of course, are directly elected by the voters. Managers are appointed by an elected council, sometimes usually called a city council, sometimes, as in Watertown, called a town council. And that chief executive officer is an extremely important position. She or he is in charge of the city day to day, in charge of its administration, responsible for procurement, for negotiating contracts, for hiring and supervising city employees, and for many other things about the daily running of the city. Now, sometimes, the distinction between these two types of CEOs, the mayor and the manager, is is described in terms of the mayor being a political head of the executive branch and the manager being a professional. The elected mayor comes from the political process. That's a political CEO. The appointed manager, not being directly elected, being a professional CEO. And there's an element of truth to that, but it's a distinction that really pretty quickly blurs. Elected mayors almost always have professional administrators working for them. Some cities, including some of the ones that presented at the council recently, have a position even in their charter for a chief administrative officer in addition to the mayor. And as far as managers are concerned, even if they're not elected directly by the voters, their job is certainly a very political job. And there are a number of examples of managers, city managers around the state who actually in their former lives were politicians. I think in particular of Lowell, where the current city manager went there from the state Senate. She was the state senator for that area. And I believe her predecessor was one of my colleagues in the House. So if we turn for a second to the other branch, to the legislative branch, both of these forms of city government, the council mayor and the council manager, have obviously an elected legislature, that council. And where things get interesting and where we see a fair amount of diversity is in the division of authority between that legislative body and the executive, and the system of checks and balances that exists between them. Some of that is set out in state law. For example, only the council can adopt ordinances. Local law must be adopted by the council. It cannot be something that the mayor or manager can single-handedly create. A second example of what the state law pretty clearly establishes is that the budget must be prepared and presented by the executive, by the mayor or the manager. It must then be approved by the council, but the council can only make limited changes to that budget. We had some discussion about that the other night at the Charter Review Committee. A third example of this is state law sets out that appointments to certain boards or commissions must be made by the mayor or the manager. So those are instances where state law controls, and there's not an option really to alter that at the local level. But the reality is that beyond that, much is determined, by the charter in each community, or by the ordinances that are adopted by the council. And even where some things are fixed in state law, like those examples I just gave, there's still a fair amount of variation in the details from city to city. And that leads to some significant differences in the division of authority and in that system of checks and balances from community to community. To give an example, I was just talking about budgets and about the state law power in the mayor or the manager to prepare that budget. But there's a lot of variation in when and how the council and the public participate and shape the budget process. Many of you are probably aware that here in Watertown, we have a process where the manager presents a preliminary budget overview at the beginning of the budget cycle. And then the town council goes through a very in-depth and very elaborate, and I think a very good process of developing budget policy guidelines, which are then given to the manager to give him direction as he puts some flesh on the bones of the budget. If you look at some of the other cities around the state, you see some variance on this. In Amherst, where again they have a council manager form of government, they do a variation on the Watertown system. They actually hold a public forum at the very beginning of their budget process, at which both the town manager and the town council present their ideas on what should be the priorities in the budget, and they solicit feedback from the public at that point. In Franklin, which is another council manager city, they have a separate body altogether called a finance committee, which is made up of non-elected officials, not town officials, just members of the community. They're appointed by the town council, and they do a separate review of the budget and make recommendations to the town council. And Tony and Lisa were just referring to this interesting twist that they use up in Beverly, which is a council mayor form of government, where the council has within its own staff a budget analyst who provides the council itself with independent analysis of the budget. So even within that area where there are some sort of guideposts or guardrails established by state law, there's a lot of variation from city to city. And where state law doesn't speak, there is even more scope for variation. And an example of this has to do with the role of the legislative branch, the city council or the town council, regarding the appointment of department heads. In Watertown, the council does not play a role with respect to the manager's appointments to the heads of the various town departments. In Franklin, again, another council manager form of government, the town council does ratify the appointments of the manager to some department heads, but not to others. So the fire chief, the police chief, the DPW director, the comptroller, those appointments go to the town council for ratification. Amherst has the town council there has the authority to ratify all of the department heads. But there's a sort of a procedural sort of limit placed on that, which is that if the council doesn't act within 14 days of the appointment, then it's deemed to have approved the appointment.
John, if I can just jump in, it's Larry.
Yeah.
We want to get over to Roberta in a minute or two, and
Sure.
then we're going to have a chance.
That's about what I have left.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
So I was just going to mention that Beverly is, again, another one of these ones that we've been looking at the Charter Review Committee, has another variant on this, which is that the council, the city council up there, is involved in the removal of certain department heads. So if the manager and the mayor in that instance in Beverly wants to remove the heads of the public safety departments, that has to be approved by the city council. So I'm not, it's open to debate whether it's a good idea to have the council involved in the appointment or the removal of department heads. Certainly there's some people who would argue that getting the council in the middle of that complicates lines of reporting, that the council should not be involved in the chief executive's authority to appoint and supervise the administrative team. And I'm not, I don't want to debate the merits of that right here. I just wanted to, use that as an illustration of, not only do we not have, one size fits all in terms of state government around the state, but I think there's really no one size at all that there's really a lot of room to shape the city form of government, whichever one is chosen to suit local values and needs. So I'll stop there. Thank you for listening, and Larry, you can turn things over to Roberta.
Thanks, John. Very helpful perspective on all the varieties of options there are in local government. Roberta, let's turn it over to you.
All right. Well, folks, great to be here. Thanks for your interest and thanks for your involvement and setting up this forum. As you can see, John just laid out all of the complexity, not all of it, but referred to this tremendous level of complexity that we have in municipal and local government. I'm going to talk a little bit about how this has evolved. So in the evolution of urban leadership, traditionally we always had mayors, and mayors there are some excesses of the mayor form of government that we were suffering from with kind of the classic machines that ran, say, one that's often referred to as Chicago. Albany is one of the best political machines in the country. And the city manager form of government really came out as part of the reform movement for how do we professionalize hiring, firing, contracts that had been done, had devolved into kind of cronyism. And how do we integrate a professional management into our overall system? So the city manager form of government really became one of the tools for reform in this country. And the evolution since then that we've seen is people trying very hard to kind of pick what they like about both forms of government, the mayor form of government, and making sure and the professional management with a city manager. And are there ways to integrate kind of the best of both? The idea is that you want to really create your most effective team for political leadership and your administrative leadership. Both of them are critical to run your city. If you don't have good political leadership, you're not going to have the accountability that you need. You're not going to have the access you need. And if you don't have good administrative leadership, you're not going to be able to work in a business-like way, which is basically what you're doing. You're running a very large corporation with millions of dollars in your budget. And that has to be done effectively. You're spending all of the town's residents' money, and there's a huge fiscal responsibility about that. So and I hate to say this because, as John also said, there's really nothing easy about this, guys. We're really created this hybrid, and the devil is in the details. The big ideas are not the ones that are going to make the most effective team. So our kind of critical issues and what we've done in Watertown is the real innovation of leadership in Watertown was there was a lot of argument when the first council, the town manager form of government was first instituted, that there were a lot of things about the mayor form of government that people liked. And in order to address that, the innovation was the council president, who was usually selected or often selected by the council itself, was to be elected by the residents at large. So that is the same way a mayor would be elected. So it creates a political leadership and elevates the council president in a way that is quite unusual. In Boston, they have a weak council, a very strong mayor. So I'm not going to go into all of the different varieties. I think John has given us a good taste of the millions of different ways that you can slice this. So, but I also just want to reiterate that it really is very possible to create the kind of balance that you want with either form of government. I've worked with many cities across the country, city manager form of government and mayor form of government. And the critical issues that you have identified, transparency, accountability, diversity, equity, inclusion, responsiveness, communication, public engagement, fiscal management, those can always be improved. And there are ways to do that through your charter, and there are ways to do that through your norms and your laws. So those are all areas that I think to improve our overall democracy, you can continue to work on. So any questions or anything else, John, you want to add?
Thank you so much, Roberta and John. I'm always amazed at how nuanced town governance can really be, and we never stop learning, no matter how many years you're at it, because things change over time. So that being said, we now invite everybody in attendance today to ask any specific questions of John and Roberta, our panel here today. And for anybody who's still, processing the information, we invite you to think about a question that might help to frame what they just said in a more broad way. And that is, what is something you might want to know more about based on what you just heard in the presentation? Because I know that I feel like I have more questions now than I did before. And as a reminder, you can always use the chat to make comments, to ask questions, but part of our goal here in a charter chat is to create a stronger sense of connection and community in Watertown. So we really encourage folks to use the raise hand feature so that we can hear your voice. As much as you feel comfortable, leave your camera on so we can see your face. I know we can't all be together, but we'd like to make this as human of an experience as possible. So we really encourage you, if you want to get your question addressed as a priority, please raise your hand, and then anything else in the chat we'll keep adding in. I've got Tiffany helping me today monitor the chat, but we may not get to everything in the chat, but we'll make sure we get to everything live if people are raising their hands. So I have a question that I want to start off with just to get things going, and I'm just curious from both of you, John and Roberta, what, in your experience, what was your favorite form of government that you worked under? And what do you think that it was the structure of government, or do you think that it was the way, the iteration of how it was organized, the team, so to speak, that Roberta was referencing, the team that was amassed? Just curious about that.
I'm not quite sure how to answer that question. Like the favorite form of government that we ever worked on?
Yeah, just like your favorite town or city that you worked under. Was it the way that it was structured? Was it the power balance that you liked the best about it? I know you've worked with a lot of different cities, and I'm just curious if you had, a certain structure that you thought worked best. It was good communication, good accountability. It seemed to flow well. You had good connection with your community, or something that you thought really made it stand out for you in your career, if that clears it up.
Well, part of the problem I have with that is most times people called me in when things were not going that well. So I had a lot of very interesting experiences. I worked on the Chelsea charter reform. Chelsea was a very unique situation, and they ended up choosing a city manager form of government, but they had come out of a whole rich history of indicting their mayors for a whole variety of corruption issues. So those are, I'm more knowledgeable about the downsides and how you kind of create structures to get out of a bad place. You know, I worked in Scottsdale, Arizona, which is an extraordinarily well-run community. So I worked in, and they did have a city manager form of government. They had a very engaged, active council. You know, the problem is they had a lot of wealthy CEOs who lived there who weren't used to following anybody's rules but their own. So everybody's got problems. And bringing those kinds of governance issues to folks in an even way that's actually fair. A lot of times you have to step around the usual laws. In Chelsea, we did a charter reform process where we didn't have an elected charter committee. And the reason we didn't is because a lot of the residents were not citizens, but they were residents. And we wanted to make sure those voices were heard in the process. So we had to alter the process and really dream up something new. So I think the thing that you have to address in these circumstances is what kind of circumstance are we in Watertown, and what do we need? What is it that people want to be able to do that they're not able to do? What is it that we want from our government? Are we confronting a certain kinds of issues that we need to have better tools to deal with? Do we have pockets of our community that don't have representation? Those are the kinds of challenges, but you look at where we are and what we're trying to do, and then you structure your government around how to do that.
I'm not sure I can add a whole lot to that, really. I mean, my experience, direct experience, is limited to really a sample of one, namely Watertown, where I served on the council. You know, I as state rep also represented part of Cambridge, and so became somewhat familiar with municipal government in Cambridge as well. Cambridge, like Watertown, is a council manager form of government. I think, interestingly, from at least my outsider's perspective as a state rep, I came to feel that Watertown actually has worked better in terms of the balance between the council and the manager. The council, I think, has done a better job of making its policy direction known to the manager and working with the manager to try to advance those policies, especially in the budget area. Maybe we need to strengthen that in some other areas. Cambridge, interestingly, is a very large city government, because Cambridge is a very wealthy community in terms of its tax base. So it provides a range of services way beyond what Watertown, at least historically, has been able to do, and that in a sense has sort of brought municipal government in Cambridge into more areas where I think some clearer policy direction from the council would be appropriate and helpful. And I think Cambridge is struggling to kind of figure that out. So that's sort of the extent of my direct experience.
Thank you. We have a few hands raised here, and apologies if I'm looking at this in the wrong order, but I believe Dan had his hand raised first. So go ahead, Dan, you can ask your question.
Thanks. Hey, John. Hey, Rebecca. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us. One question that I had as someone who wasn't around back in the day when we shifted to the form of government we have now in Watertown is, I know there was talk about the innovation of sort of having the town council president. And I just was wondering, how do you guys see, or how do you see the ways that the government has, or the town form of government has shifted in ways that you expected and wanted to see, like things that you wanted to get out of it, and in ways that you didn't expect? And then as a sort of a follow-up question to that was, when you talked about the town council president, was the idea that the president would sort of be the face or the vision of the town, similar to like what a mayor was, without having to have the managerial expertise? Or was there some other idea or concept behind that?
I'm happy to take that. First, on the town council president, the town council president and the manager were supposed to have this kind of unique partnership, and that a special relationship. And I do think that a town council president was supposed to be the vision and the one to lead the community in that kind of a way. So they would be the elected representation of that vision. And we have had very diverse people run for that office, and it's been a clear choice in many, many of our elections, which kind of way people wanted to go. In your previous question, was there something that kind of surprised people in terms of the way it was structured and how it actually turned out? One of the things that folks really talked a lot about is having the entree into public life, having the barrier be very low, so that if someone wanted to run for office, let's not make it that hard. How do we make it as easy as possible? So the idea with the district councilors was that that would be an easy way for people to enter into an elected position. And the at-large positions were seen as a little harder because you had to run townwide. It turned out to be kind of the opposite of the way we thought. People who are in the districts tend to stay a long time, and there hasn't been a lot of turnover in those positions. There's been more turnover in the at-large. So I think, you kind of, people guessed at how to create a, but the idea is a great one. How do you create positions and ways for people to enter into politics and enter into the public realm without too much difficulty or too much expense? John, anything else you want to add to that?
No, not really. I mean, my experience in Watertown goes back to the mid-90s, so I was not present at the creation of this form of government. So I think Roberta has a better perspective on that than I do. I think the question of the role of the town council president and how that has worked in practice is a really interesting one. I think it has largely depended on the personalities, both in the town council position as well as in the town manager position, and some of that is inevitable, and of course that's an important aspect of any system of government is the particular circumstances and the particular people who are in the jobs. But we might want to be giving some more thought to whether there are ways that we could sort of formally, depending on whether people do in fact want to see the town council president play the role, the sort that Roberta was saying was sort of the original conception of a setting vision and sort of being a political leader for the community as a whole, whether we need to think about how to formalize that and structure that in ways that give it a little bit more, certainty.
Great. We're going to move on to Chuck. You had your hand up.
Yeah, my question was on this very same topic about the town, the council president. And I think you've talked about it because I wanted to know your viewpoints on how well you felt that worked out. But I think I've got the gist of it already. So thank you.
Sure, you bet. Thank you. Jackie, you are up.
Hi, I just wanted to say that I've come to the position that we should keep the town manager and not take on that major struggle in Watertown and really focus heavily on all these proposals that we're hearing about from other towns, with the town council having more, say in hiring and, more transparent, just all of that stuff. That, we really up the ante on what kind of reporting the town manager needs to do to the community, to the town council, to certain questions, like just really focus on that. And, we could have 10 years of that with very intensive, pulling people in from the community and changing kind of how people can kind of do things without that. Residents having a look at it and employees having a way to challenge things that have been going on and all that. I just think changing the structure right now is just not to me, is not the priority. The priority is changing the accountability, changing the who has to answer to who, and just really making that like a strong issue. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Jackie. I echo that sentiment. I want to actually get to the chat before we run out of time. We still have a few minutes.
Janice, was that Deborah or was that Jackie that just went?
That was Jackie. I was going to just address a couple of those more salient
got you.
earlier in the chat. I don't know if you have them teed up. I know that Rita had a question for Roberta about Watertown specifically, and then Marcy, if you wouldn't mind reading those.
Sure. Rita's question was directed at you, Roberta. What do you think would benefit Watertown the most right now, as you've kind of learned kind of the situation we're in with the charter and some of the values that the public is raising that they aren't seeing played out?
So specifically what people aren't seeing happening, is that the question?
No, the question is, what do you think would most benefit Watertown the most? Maybe an idea or a strategy or just, from your expertise and.
That's a very big question. I do think that, I guess I think one of the best strategies that I've seen out there, and this is going to sound a little off base, but that I think communities can greatly benefit from is there's a training program that I used to work with years and years ago and throughout the country, and were called community leadership training programs. And to tell you the truth, most people don't know how town government works. They don't know how the police department works. They don't know how the assessing department works. You kind of run in when you get your tax bill, then you realize there's a town government, or and it's an education program that really tells people about their government, and you learn about it. You learn about the law department, you learn about the police department, you learn about do you want to help with elections and make sure that elections are held safely and securely. There are roles for people in all of those places, and I think we've lost perspective on that. And I think it's one of the most helpful strategies to do that. It's not exactly addressing the charter issues, but I think part of what we're seeing is, how do people engage with the actually have open government. And there's lots of ways. And as Lisa was saying, there are several different missions or committees that people can serve on, and they have a hard time finding volunteers who are willing to do it. So there, the outreach and the communication about how you can part of not just complain, but how you can be part of your community, I think is a really, really important need. That's the biggest thing that I see in front of us, that we're not making that connection. We're not helping people figure out how best they can help shape this democracy and make it better. So, and anyway, I have one other cautionary statement, which is, you know, from my experience, my professional experience, I often saw communities run awry and get into situations where there was a lot of corruption. And I would never encourage anyone to be in a political position and then also do hiring. It's, you put too much pressure on people and there's too many conflicts. So you want to keep your hiring position in separate for your administrators. You want to keep that separate from the voting position. Voting is really about direction. It's about policies. It's about where we want to go and what kind of new emerging issues we want to address.
Hear, hear. Deborah, thank you for being so patient. We will take your question next, followed by Ilana, and that may bring us to time. So if anyone has any questions, we may not get to the chat questions, but feel free to put them in there because we do document, and I take minutes that I post on the website following each meeting. So take it away, Deborah.
Okay, well, thanks, John and Roberta. I think you did a great job of really making the case that you can, either form of government, you can get, you can tweak to get what you want. So that to me means the important thing is to decide what it is you want. What do you need to change? What's good, what's not good? So I'm a little disturbed that it seems like the next thing that the Charter Review Committee is going to do is going to sort of vote mayor or town council. Those of you who are on the Charter Review, I wonder if you think there's any possibility of...
Can you see me?
Hello? Those of you who are on the Charter Review Committee, I wonder if you think there's any chance of the processing.
Marilyn, we do see you. I'm going to go ahead and mute you because we have an attendee asking a question. Thank you for coming.
If you think there's a chance for the Charter Review Committee to actually talk about what they want to see, and is there a chance of sort of reaching some kind of consensus about that?
And maybe I'm thinking, John, as a member of the Charter Review Committee, maybe you could give the first response to that.
Well, I've been thinking that also, Deborah. I mean, I thought that the way we started out by sort of focusing on what are sort of core, values or attributes. My hope had been that we would go from that to maybe identifying what particular features of town government or structures or rules or and these may involve things that are not part of the charter at all, just norms or skills are necessary to try to achieve those sorts of objectives or values, and then we would sort of see where that brought us out in terms of what that meant in terms of the overall structure, rather than doing it the other way around. So I would be very open to that. I think there's still, I think it's undecided still, as Tony was saying at the beginning, sort of how we're really going to proceed over this next phase. I mean, I think there's been some value to talking about the two forms of government, because it has, allowed us to bring in individuals who happen to be identified with those two different forms of government to share their experiences. But I would be open to sort of not focusing sort of on that big question, which I agree, obviously, because this is what I was saying in my remarks, is in some ways a distraction. At the end of the day, we have to be one form of government or the other, but I think it would be better if we would start with what we're trying to achieve and then figure out how which of those governments in which of its many variants works best.
Thank you, John.
That's just one. We haven't really had that discussion as a committee.
Thank you so much for that perspective. We
Could
have
I,
time for one.
could I just respond to that too?
Sure, Tony. Yep. And then we'll just take Alana's question as the final question. And Marcia, if you wouldn't mind putting yours in the chat. I'm sorry.
I actually, while I was, I think, a little bit like John, when we opened up the committee first meeting after being sworn in, we jumped into this issue of mayor, council, mayor, manager. At the same time, I think there was enough knowing what we wanted, though maybe not as specifically as we might have wanted, but I think there was enough concern about accountability, about communication, about responsiveness, about transparency, that these issues were mentioned, and we've heard them as counselors, we've confronted them. And so that the transparency, accountability, responsiveness, communication, engagement issues were not new. They were issues that people had told us as counselors about and had raised about. And so that when you think about this is the problem, what is the potential solution? It is realistic to think that one of the solutions is to have someone who is a mayor who is responsive, who is who is directly responsible for those kind of things. And so, for example, I'm a strong believer in a mayor form of government, because I think that the mayor form of government addresses those issues around accountability, responsiveness, and puts the onus on the person elected to make sure they do those things. There's no onus put on the town manager to do those things. So there's always like identify the problem before you go for the solution. I think the problem was identified. And this is one of the solutions that you could take.
Thank you, Tony, very much. Alana, we just have a few minutes left. We have about 5 minutes left. So if we could keep our answers somewhat brief, and then we'll close with our final poll.
Thank you. My name's Ilana, and I'm sorry I arrived late. I was goofed about what time the meeting started, and so I don't know if this has been mentioned before. But I hear people saying to sort of not open the bigger can of worms, maybe, about changing the whole form of government. And yet some of the issues we need to address. And I wonder if maybe one of the ways that we might keep the form we have, but tweak it some, be to think about some term limits. I don't know, I don't favor them in general, in my general point of view of larger forms of government. So I'm just toying with that idea. But I know that since I've lived in Watertown for 26 years, lots of the same people have held the same positions all of that time. And that doesn't match the vision that I heard Roberta presenting. So I wonder if one of the ways we could maybe have people be more accountable, even within the system that we have, is if there was more turnover.
Thank you, Alana. Did you have any response to that briefly, Roberta or John, before we close?
Well, I think there's, I don't think the stability had on the council is a bad thing, but I do think having the ability for people to enter into the system is really important. But the council is not the only place that can happen. There's plenty of other opportunities for people to serve.
Excuse me, Roberta, I didn't mean just the council.
You meant commissions, boards and commissions too?
And even the town manager.
Oh, the town manager, that he's been there for a long time.
Yes.
My experience is that that is not necessarily a bad thing. From looking at the in and of itself, that kind of stability can often be helpful.
Agreed, it can often be, but not necessarily. It's just something to think about.
Yeah, no, sometimes it's good to have new people in and new blood and new visions and new thoughts and the next generation, whoever that might be. I agree with you.
Well, I want to just take, John, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I'll try to be brief. I mean, I guess I also am not sure that you want to have, really rigid term limits on the counselors, or the manager. I think where we should be doing more, and reference was made to the system out in Amherst, which I was also impressed with, is encouraging more people to come forward and more turnover in the boards and commissions, where there are, I think, people who would like actually to get off some of those boards and commissions who have been on them for a long time, and where we're not, unfortunately, finding always new people coming forward. And I think we could be doing much more in terms of outreach, and particularly to parts of the community that haven't been as involved, to encourage them to get active, in a important, responsible way on some of these commissions and boards, and that in turn may lead to more people then ultimately seeking to run for office. I would put the emphasis especially there, and let the political process work its will at the council, and have the council work its responsibility with regard to the manager. The manager is on a contract, so the council has an opportunity to review him. That's something I think we need to look at, how the review is being done, how goals are being set, how evaluation is being done against those goals. I think we could be doing more on that front, but I wouldn't arbitrarily put something particularly in the charter that limits the length of service.
I know we have a handful of questions in the chat and a few live questions we weren't able to get to today. It is 4:31, so we just want to be respectful of everyone's time here. And I would like to take a moment to really offer our appreciation and thanks to John and Roberta for coming here today and for fielding all these questions and offering your insights. This has been very interesting for me personally. I've got my paper turning, and I hope we can bring some of these conversations to future charter chats. So if anyone didn't get their question answered today, I know there were a number we didn't get to. Please feel free to put them in the chat, and we might be able to get them answered for you for next time. And I will, at this point, we're going to close up. Thank you for staying on for the extra minute. For anyone who is still here, we do have a poll that we would love for people to fill out if they would. Instead of just our normal rating us from 1 to 5, we have a bit more of a substantive poll today. And as the poll is up, feel free to add anything into the chat, any suggestions for future charter chats or feedback. We really welcome feedback. This is something that is not a static forum. We're open to feedback and change at every charter chat. So the poll, which Emily will put up for us, is considering the following values that we've discussed in previous chats around town governance: transparency, accountability, diversity, equity, inclusion, responsiveness, communication, public engagement, and fiscal management. To what extent do you agree or disagree with the following statements, with 1 being strongly disagree and 5 being strongly agree? And the first statement is Watertown can improve upon these values with our current town manager, town council structure, with specific changes to the charter addressing these values. So we'll give you a minute to answer those. Answer that single one.
What values are you referring to?
So the values that have come up throughout these conversations: transparency, accountability, diversity, equity, inclusion, responsiveness, communication, public engagement, and fiscal management. It's a
Sorry,
lot.
I didn't realize. Okay.
Yeah, no worries. I know that's a lot. And that's not in the actual poll itself. I'm happy to repeat those for each statement.
So we're going to ask people, Janice, I believe, to fill out answer all three of these questions and then submit, correct?
Oh, it's already up there. Sorry, I thought we were doing one at a time. And then the second one, as you can see, if you scroll down, Watertown, for anyone on the phone, Watertown is already achieving most of these values and no changes to our town manager, town council structure is needed. And the third, in order to improve upon these values, Watertown should change to a mayoral form of government. Thank you, Larry. Just give me a minute here. I know we're over time. Thank you so much for staying. This is very helpful for us.
Hello.
Hi, Marilyn.
Hi. It was a very interesting meeting today. I really appreciate all the comments, but you know, as someone who served over 14 terms on the town council, I was the only counselor that served in both governments in Watertown. I served in the legislative body as a town meeting member in the town, and I was elected as a counselor in the new form of in Watertown. So I think I have a perspective of what we've lost and what a lot of people are concerned at. It's the apathy. We can't even get 3 people to run for 3 positions on the library, and we have to appoint someone. You know, there's something wrong. And you know, I'll tell you, in all the years, almost 30 years that I was on the council, the only people who came to the meeting were department heads. And when we had a town, the auditorium in the high school would be filled. It was a place for the people of Watertown to get together. And there would be a warrant that was sent out to every resident, and they knew what was going to be on, what was going to be voted, and they had warrant meetings. People don't know what's going on. And as far as people not applying, I'm going to tell you, I know, and I'm going to give you a name, Bob McCarthy. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Marilyn.
Okay.
And
All right.
I appreciate.
All right. I'm just telling you that people apply and they don't even get an interview. So you know what? We've got to be transparent. Why aren't there minorities being appointed on these boards and commissions? I'm just saying, I have a lot of information. I'm disappointed that Mr. Sedaris rejected me to be on the committee, because I think I have some knowledge representing 37 towns and cities in Massachusetts. And so, but I love what you're doing, and I thank you for doing it. And I'm sorry that, you know, that we couldn't get into more things. This is my one final comment.
All right, Marilyn, you get it.
After 41 years, we should have a review of every single government in Massachusetts. We have 312 town meeting governments, and this review committee will not invite anyone from towns to even participate. That's not an open process. Whatever they decide on, whatever form of government is right. But just because you don't like a certain form, that doesn't mean you should not include it to educate
Thank you,
people.
Marilyn. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
We
you
really
for all
want
you
to.
do. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your perspective, Marilyn. And you know, please feel free, if you have any comments you want to add, and feel free to email anybody in town, your counselor, or we have a lot of different channels that we can connect as a community. So we want to just share the poll results quickly. So the first question about Watertown can improve on these values with our current structure by just addressing the charter. We have, you can actually see here on the screen for anyone who's on, I don't think we have anybody on the phone, so everybody can actually see there what the results are. And then this is for if we're already achieving these in our town manager council structure, and then the third. So thank you very much for coming today, everybody. And thank you again to John and Roberta for offering your insight and your time. And here are just a few bits of information about the upcoming Charter Review Committee meeting, the next Charter Chat, and then just some website resources for you if you have any more information you want to go digging for.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Janice, I just wanted to also add really quickly that if you're interested in volunteering with Watertown Forward, we have 2 working groups, the Outreach and Engagement Committee and the Education Committee, and you can email us to get involved. And then also next Sunday, we're hosting an all-team Watertown Forward meeting at 3 o'clock. So if you want to get involved, don't know how to get involved with Watertown Forward or have some questions for us, this is a great opportunity for you to learn more and find out ways to get involved. So please keep an eye out for an email invitation early this week. Thank you everyone for joining.